Let's go to our regular sporting history segment now. And this week I'm speaking to a legend of New Zealand horse racing. In fact, the sport of horse racing has been Noel Harris's whole life. His dad, Jock, was a Manawatū jockey and horse trainer who won more than 350 races. And following in his father's footsteps, Noel rode his first winner at Foxton on the 16th of May 1970. And by the time he retired from racing in 2015, 45 years later, he had ridden over 2,000 winners in New Zealand. That's incredible. He also won the jockeys premiership in both New Zealand and Singapore. In 2018, Noel was inducted into the New Zealand Racing Hall of Fame, and earlier this year was awarded the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to the thoroughbred racing industry. These days he lives in Mount Maunganui and is a mentor for apprentice jockeys. And Noel Harris joins us now. Hello.
Hi, Jesse. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm very humbled. Yeah.
Oh, so great to spend some time chatting to you about your incredible career. And we better start with that Order of Merit. How was that?
Yeah, I was humbled. Still can't believe it. It's something that I've enjoyed putting into, like being a jockey and a racing family. And afterwards, I was sort of ready to quit the riding game. And my wife, Kylie, put her hand up and said, "I think you'd be good at teaching these mentoring these apprentices." So I was thinking twice about it, but I'm pleased I didn't now, Jesse. It's been 10 years now.
Yeah. I'm keen to hear what you get out of that and how it goes for you. Is that particularly what the Order of Merit was recognising, your contribution in that respect, as well as your successes?
Yeah, I'd say so. Working with apprentices, guiding them, put them on the right track, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
how did it all go down? Did they send you an email or call you, or is it a complete surprise?
Yeah, well, actually, it was probably 2 months before the awards, for the new year. A guy rang me and I thought someone was having me on. And
It's a very New Zealand
surprise,
response, eh?
well, I just said, "Yeah, who is this?" And no, he said, so I was just taken by surprise. And yeah, I worked out a couple of long time acquaintances had nominated me. So yeah, very humbled though, Jesse.
Well, take us back to your early life. And actually, before we talk about your views on things, someone is specifically asking about your brother, who this person reckons, this is Dean, reckons your brother, Des, had the longest hair of any jockey. Do you recall those days?
Yeah, there was Johnny was the oldest, Desi's second, I was third, Peter was fourth. And we had two. Yeah, it was in that era in the 70s. We all had long hair, so the stewards were asking us to get our locks cut. So my dad had put his hand up and said, "How long do you want it? As far as length." And they virtually said, "Well, in the rules of racing, a jockey's got to be cleanly shaven." So Jock said, "What length?" And the steward said, "Well, about an inch above the collar would be nice." And Jock said, "Well, how would with the afro here, Michael Jackson, how would he have got on?" Been an inch above the collar, but yeah. So there was at that stage the stewards started growing sideburns, So
Yeah.
we just dug in, and in the end they let us, let our hair grow, and especially when we went to Australia over there to ride. The Aussie jockeys dug in and said, "You're not going to tell us how to dress." And
Yeah, gosh, it must be an interesting life. What was it about your family that made you such good jockeys?
oh, my dad was passionate. He had a brother also was a jockey. He got killed in a race when he was 19. The Taranaki Māori. He come down when he was 16 down to Palmerston North, and that's actually where we were all born. But Dad being a Taranaki Māori, he said, "That's the place to be, Palmerston North. That's where all the action is with the horses." And But he was very dedicated, very strong sort of a man, and very hard worker. So it just sort of snowballed from there, you know. Before then, there was no racing history.
Mm. Did you have a good relationship with your dad?
I used to tell people my backside looked like Italy, shape of a boot.
Jeez.
And I said to Dad when I was about 40, I said, "Oh, my arse is shaped like Italy." He said, "Oh, that's a bit harsh." But it was what it was, and very hard taskmaster. But he would never compliment you, but he'd always tell you where you went wrong. Um, but I had no complaints, you know, a few years later, having a family, and when I grew up, to discipline, and that was the main attribute for that era. And I still think now a lot of my friends, you know, it's calling people Mister and just that respect, Jesse,
Yeah,
you know.
of course.
Yeah. So
I
it took
can
us a long way.
I
Yeah.
can see that. And did he tell you that he wanted you to go into the racing industry, become a jockey?
Yeah, well, at that time, I loved me gymnastics. My brother Desi and myself, we loved, you know, the gymnastics, but my dad worked out, you're not going to get rich on gymnastics, so you're going to be a jockey. But, so before I was 15, over the holidays, he booked me out of school, and and that was it. I was an apprentice jockey at the age of 15.
15 years old.
Yeah, 15, I was, yeah.
Did you immediately feel comfortable in that world?
Oh, especially with my eldest brother, Johnny. I was a fan of Johnny, and used to follow him his first few years. He was leading apprentice, Johnny, and yeah, that was just my whole life. You know, I did no other sport except for the All Blacks, and that was about it. Sort of listening to races, and not on TV, but even the radio, you know. And and then Desi, my second brother, he transitioned, and I was the third. So yeah, and as it turned out, we all rode, you know, my two sisters as well. So there's six of us. Yeah.
How much is there to learn for an apprentice jockey?
Oh, there is a lot. It's first thing you got to have with a horse a passion. You got to like your animals, and once you get past that sort of barrier, it's just it's all about riding winners, and um, you get thrown in the deep end. And I felt my from being 15 when I first started. By the time I was 18, I'd sort of put 10 years on my life. For all the amount of money, big money you were riding for, the owners, they were 20, 30 years older than yourself. So yeah, at 15, you were an adult virtually. So, and the more you could sell yourself or put yourself out there, and it was just a promotion game. That
Was it? Is there a marketing aspect to it?
Oh, definitely, without you knowing it. That's
Can you tell me about that?
there was one. Yeah, well, there's one saying, like, you could tell someone their wife's no good, but you could never say their horse was no good.
Oh my gosh.
It was something you learned at a very young age, and it was, you know, like I was 18 when I had my first ride in the Melbourne Cup, and I was just appreciative that I was given the chance to ride in the Cup, and at 18 and still an apprentice, and it was for my father. He trained the horse, and it was a big responsibility. I think 1973, and I think the Melbourne Cup was worth 150,000 then. So it was big money in those days, and it's always a jockey's dream, you know, Melbourne Cup.
Yeah, but you're only 18 years old.
18, yeah, and I got beat ahead, and the headlines the next day, Australian headlines, boy on a man's errand, and every time I went back to Australia, oh, you're the boy that got beat on Glengowan. So for years I copped that, and that's typical of Australia.
Can you just explain that to me? I didn't quite follow that. Did you say you got bet on?
Beaten in the Melbourne Cup.
Ah, beaten.
I was 7. Yeah. I was 18 at the time, and what they're saying, you're a boy on a man's errand. meaning you got beaten, you're only an apprentice, and it's virtue for the men, not an apprentice.
But hang on, coming second at the Melbourne Cup isn't a failure, right?
No, oh my God, it was like, I was so offended. My biggest disappointment, Jesse, was that because it was my dad's horse, and at 18, if I was good enough, I could have a lot of chances of having another go at riding a Melbourne Cup winner. But for my dad, it's a one-off virtually for a trainer, unless you're the Bart Cummings. But yeah, so that was probably the sad thing for me.
How many horses in a typical Melbourne Cup?
There were about 24 runners,
Yeah.
and I had Roy Higgins was their champion jockey in Australia, and after the race, he was on the radio and he says, "Oh, Noel Harris," he said, "if you're listening to this," he said, "you could have gone home with a young girl each side of your shoulder, and but instead you're going to go home with the horse on the float." It was a great saying, actually, and
It's very tough, very tough commentary for an 18-year-old boy who'd just come second in the Melbourne Cup, though.
Oh, well, the year later, Brent Thompson, he was one of our leading apprentices. He came over and rode the favourite on Fury's Order too. He got beaten. He run last actually, or second to last, and not a word was said. But yet, because I got beat ahead, and the Australians, they love a story, don't they? And
and forgive me not knowing the terminology well. You were beaten by a head, like it was that close.
Yeah, the horse's head. That's
the
margin.
Head, okay.
Head. Yeah. So, and everybody says, "Oh, a head," and I said, "Well, a head's as good as a mile, isn't it?" You run second. Yeah. So
it's funny you won 2,000 races, and yet it sounds like you still feel that one.
Oh, it's amazing the people, the stories from then on. As I say, the Aussies, every time we went over, Noel had, "Oh, you're the kid that got beat on Glen Mountain."
Come on, really?
Yeah. So it wasn't until I won the Cox Plate. Well, if you can't win a Melbourne Cup, you can win a Cox Plate. That's probably as good as any. And
Poetic
in
Prince?
'88, I won. Poetic Prince, that's correct. And after that, they dropped that. They dropped the kid being got beat in the Cup. But it's what Aussies are, though, and that's why I admire them. They're very tough taskmasters, and they love winning, and it taught me a lot, But
so you had 15 years of being called the boy on a man's errand. 15 years of that because you came second at age 18, and you could have come first.
Could have come, yeah. And Roy Higgins actually said he was on one of the favourites and followed me through the race. He said, the boy could not have faltered his ride, and I would never, he said he was perfect ride. So coming from Roy Higgins, I took that and I run with that. But it hardened you, as I said, from a very early age.
Yeah. That must have done a lot for your personalities in terms of, what is that, resilience, thick skin, becoming philosophical, dealing with pressure?
Well, it got to the stage where you're probably only as good as your last winner, and you get beat on a horse, and on the way home driving, you think, "Shit, how could I have won on that? What could I have done?" And it's quite consuming. It's and as I said, you're riding for big money, and the fact that if you don't ride the horse good, you next week you mightn't be on it. So so the pressure of success.
Well, you got plenty of that. You got plenty of success. And just before we leave the Melbourne Cup, I mean, how often did you race it? I know it was, eventually you became the oldest jockey to ever ride it. Did it retain its kind of special status for you?
Oh, yeah, just in the end, it's just to have a ride in the Melbourne Cup, so prestigious now. And I had about 12 rides in my career. I had a second, I ran third on Castletown, and I had fourth on Kiwi, the Kiwi that Jimmy Cassidy won on. I ran fourth on 1 year, and I had another fourth. So to be placed 4 times out of 12, It's just fantastic. I'm happy. But it's every jockey's dream is to win a Melbourne Cup. But you get the likes of Lance O'Sullivans and plenty of champion jockeys that never won a Melbourne Cup. So it's just now to have a ride in it. It just stops a nation or two nations actually. And I think it was about 7 million last year, the state money. Was it 7 or 8 million? But just it's life changing. It's like any sport that that you can earn on the big stage.
Yeah. So 45 years in the saddle, and how did you used to feel going into a meeting? I mean, I guess you got used to it. Did you used to get flutters of nerves?
Oh, I always had that tension, those butterflies, and if you didn't have it, it wasn't. Yeah, but I could probably, how would I put it? When I sat on a horse, a lot of people says, "Oh, you just like you got no worries," but I was tense, but I would never show it. And a lot of the jockeys would ask a few things here and there about how do you do it and how do you keep calm and all that. But it's just a personal thing that it builds up inside you. And once those gates open, bingo, it's like butterflies, they just fly away.
Yeah.
Once those gates, all these stress and tension goes. So probably a Melbourne Cup, now before the race, you could hear a pin drop. That's how quiet it is in the jockey's room. And as you said, once you go, get the instructions and then away from the crowd, round the barrier, and once they jump out, bingo. It's just like an ordinary race. Yeah.
How much, can you put a percentage on it? How much is the horse and how much is the jockey when it comes to winning a big race?
A good horse goes a long way.
Yeah.
I'd say a Cox Plate is just one exception. Even though the Melbourne Cup's everybody's dream, the Cox Plate is you've got 10, 12 horses. They're all champion horses. And from 800 metres from home, half a mile from home, they could all be under under pressure. And not a normal race, you'd get the best horse would travel so well. It's probably like a Mercedes against a mini minor. But when you get to a Cox Plate, they're all Rolls Royces, and that famous race of Waverley Star and Bone Crusher. It's just phenomenal to see horses that are so good be under pressure so far from home, from the winning post. And it's just got a thing about the Cox Plate that no other race has got.
I have to look that one up. Waverley Star and Bone Crusher. I'm not familiar with that one.
Oh yeah, it's iconic. It's just, they talk about Kiwis Melbourne Cup, but the Bone Crusher, Waverley Star, Google that one, mate, and you have a look at it. It just
What are we looking for? Just neck and neck.
Oh, they took off from about 8, which is a straight. It's by the school, and they took off 2 Kiwi horses, right, and left the rest for dead. But they were nose all the way from half a mile from the finish line, and it was the 2 Kiwi horses that finished. Yeah, and it was a nose in it, margin. But anybody in racing knows the Bone Crusher Waverley Star race. Yeah.
What was?
So I think
is there one
horse that
you go on? Sorry.
That question. No, that question you said about the horse and the jockey. It's like you need a good horse, but the top jockeys have got that X factor. They can get that little bit more out of a horse. In a tight finish and how they place their horses. Some horses will just run for certain jockeys, and and I learnt that when I rode against Lester Piggott.
Is there a mental connection between you and the horse?
Well, Lester Piggott had no roof to his mouth. He was partially deaf, and he had a connection. I felt that he just communicated with horses. It was just unbelievable. I followed him so many times. He wouldn't move his arms, but just his body and the body movement, the horse would just do things that no other jockey could do. And to me, it was just one out of the box. It's like I've never seen someone do that. And personally, myself for the horse, it's you got a deep affinity with some wood, and there's other horses. It's probably they're like human beings, horses, and you can get your real gentleman ones, and you can get your real nasty ones, and you sense it straight away.
Well, I'm speaking with Noel Harris for New Zealand Sporting History. Gosh, the time's flying too. How is it 5-3 already? I've barely got started with Noel. Tell me about Castletown. Did you have a connection with that horse?
Yeah, he won 3 Wellington Cups, and he was just Rachel Hunter and Rod Stewart were out in the Wellington Cup when he won his third, and they wanted to adopt him, take him back to America with him. But he just got I run third in the Melbourne Cup on him. He won a couple of Caulfield stakes races in Melbourne, and he actually ran third to Sub-Zero in the Melbourne Cup. But he just got past the pain barrier, as far as top horses, and he took me a long way as far as the staying horse he was.
When does a jockey peak? What age?
Well, who was it? 35. There was a scribe in Australia. Jack Elliott said to me, "Oh, you won't get good till you're 35." This is after I was 18. So he got beaten, the kid on a man's errand. Kid on a man's errand at 18. Jack Elliott said, you won't come good till you're about 35. And lo and behold, I won the Cox Plate on Prince in 35 of years of age, so 1988.
Yeah.
So he was right, actually.
Some nice stories coming through, which I'll share. Claire says that as kids, her parents used to take them to all the race meets, particularly Cup Day at Trentham. When we didn't know who to place a bet on, Mum would say, run down to the fence, and whichever jockey winked at you, then that's who you backed. And Claire says she always remembers Noel Harris winking, so you had a few bets put on you for that, Noel.
Yeah, well, I was always told the first horse you see or the first jockey you see at the course, back him, so...
That's funny. Do you know, do you have a strong suspicion when you're going to win on a horse? Do you have a feeling, or is it really up for grabs right until the race starts?
Yeah, I've been beaten on a lot of good horses that you think should have won, but I have been on horses doing the preliminary before the start. I had a feeling that this horse can win. You could say put your house on it, but that's why you don't get TABs and casinos don't go broke, because there's no certainty, and horses can make liars out of you. But it's just one of those. Especially when I rode up Singapore, Malaysia, the gambling up there was so huge. And that was just an eye-opener on its own,
What advice do you give to the young jockeys?
It's respect, perseverance. That first 4 years, it's very hard as an apprentice. You get a lot of backflack and abuse, and if you can ride that out, you get to that 4 years over and done with, then you're self-employed, and then you're your own boss. So I try to tell them, be humble, keep your cool, yes sir, no sir. And I said, you'll get your opportunity as soon as you're your own boss, and then everything's in your own hands. So basically, it's selling yourself at an age where most people, not until in your 20s odd, that you're mature enough to sort of be in that situation. But because a lot of these jockeys are young, the pressure comes on real early.
Yeah. Final question. On your back, you've got a tattoo of 4 cards, 4 aces. Why did you choose that tattoo?
Well, playing cards, I've tested myself out in Singapore a few times with a couple of big gamblers, and I knew a royal flush was better than 4 aces, but I always thought 4 aces was a hard hand to beat, but it's beatable. So it sort of kept me grounded, every time I thought of the cards. So I thought I'll get it tattooed so I don't forget that. Because there's always someone better around the corner.
And there's no
That's how
such
I
thing
looked
as a
at it.
sure thing.
No. And that's probably the grounding my dad gave me when, as I said, he'd correct you where you went wrong, but he'd never compliment you. And I felt sometimes I was in that era that I probably needed, complimenting, but it wasn't. It was the era I was in, and yeah. Now I mentor. I do put a lot of emphasis on these young kids now to not to be so hard,
Yeah,
on them.
some carrot as well as
Yeah.
stick. Noel, I've really enjoyed my time with you. Thank you so much for joining us today.